when you take this position that, this was justified, it prevents police reform.
We don't want to reform it. We actually would like to get rid of it.
So you think the Democratic Party cares about Black people? Believe it or not, Rex, I think that tweet is part of the problem. Do you feel like we could have addressed this homeless issue much sooner? You have to speak a word, make it a good one.
Okay, let's go.
Welcome back to The Word. Once again, I'm Jackie Ray. Thank you so much for joining. This is a very special episode. This one hits home for a lot of us. Hopefully you are reading the Long Beach Post and you saw the article that Jason Ruiz recently wrote about a bench that our city manager and our chief of police had a problem with. And that is the bench that is set in memorial of Donte Jordan. Donte Jordan was killed a while ago by police. We're going to get into that. But his mother is here, Pamela Fields, and then Audrena Redmond with Black Lives Matter Long Beach is here as well. We're going to discuss the process, what the bench means to the family, and why it's somewhat insulting that it's being viewed as a negative thing. So first of all, hopefully all of you saw the bench. It is absolutely gorgeous. It is colorful. It is inviting. I thought the timing of the bench for me personally was perfect because my colleagues and I, we went to a park to do an entirely different story, and there was a bench there, and I had mentioned, why do all of our park benches look like cemetery benches? Because that's what they look like to me, all due respect, but they just look very drab, very doom and gloom. So when I saw Donte's bench, I was overjoyed at the amount of color and how it seemed very individualistic and it represented him. So before we kind of get into the problematic statements, let's talk about the design of the bench. What went into that? Pamela, I'm assuming you.
She would know more about what went into it, but I could tell you how beautiful the bench is.
Mm-hmm. It is gorgeous.
Pleased I am with it and my family. It gives me a safe place to go to. I feel so connected to the bench. The next weekend after the event, I've been going every Sunday since and just hanging out in the park and taking care of the houseless as he did. And that's one of the reasons why I felt like he deserved that bench in that park.
So that park specifically, Donte had a strong connection to. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Well, yes, Donte lived across the street from that park, and he would cater to the houseless over there. He would feed, take his hibachi if he had to go to the 99-cent store and buy wieners and buns, and he just catered to them. He gave free haircuts out in that park, and I'm sure Donte took some of the people in that park to his home to bathe and stuff like that, because that's just who he was. He was very colorful, and that bench represents him in every step of the way.
Has he always had a heart for the unhoused or just people in general?
Well, we were over hospitality. My grandfather was a bishop, so we had a program called Taking It to the Streets where we would go out and, just cater to the houseless and the mental ill, whatever, bring them into a safe place we would feed. And so he was my baby. He was always up under me, so pretty much he did what he saw his mama do. And when he moved over there, he just took the ball and ran with it because that's what he was used to doing.
Is he your youngest?
He's my middle son.
He's your middle son.
Middle
so
child.
He's your baby?
He's my baby boy. He's my baby boy, but he's the middle child.
I love that. And how old was he when he passed?
39.
He's 39. And did he have kids?
He had one daughter.
And so how old is she?
18. She turned 18 the day we did the event.
Oh, okay. And so looking back, do you remember, did you have to break it to his daughter about his passing or was she there at the time?
I was so out of it. My daughter had to break it to everybody. I was just like in disbelief, just out of it.
So I want to kind of go back. I have some notes here. I want to kind of go back to that actual day. And if it's difficult, please, no problem stopping. We're going to go at your pace because I know losing especially a child, no parent is supposed to bury a child. But I do want to just kind of, and Audrena, feel free to jump in as well. But on November 10th, 2013, around 5:49 p.m., police received a 911 call that someone was at a Shell gas station shooting off a weapon. The police believe that was Donte. Do you believe it was Donte?
Being honest, I can't say if it was Donte or not, But the fact remains the same. My son was walking with his back turned, posing no threat to the officers. Regardless to what they say happened at that gas station, Donte was walking with his back turned, posing no threat. And they said that he didn't follow commands. If you really wanted my boy's attention, you could have cornered him off. You didn't have to start shooting.
That was my first initial thought as well, because I personally believe that shooting anyone in the back is a cowardice act, and I don't make any qualms about that. I also don't believe that disobeying a police order should make them judge, jury, and executioner.
Well, he had his per se, all of the witnesses, he had his Walkman in it, and they even mentioned it. He had his phone in his hand, is what I'm trying to say, and listening to music on this earbud. He was supposed to have dropped a gun 40 feet away from where he was shot at. So he was shot after,
well after he had dropped the weapon.
Well after he had made it all the way around the corner.
So this presents another problem for me. Some time ago, we also in Long Beach had a gentleman that was shot and killed by police because police couldn't tell the difference between his water hose gun.
Atlanta Gibson.
Yes.
Yes, I'm friends with his mom.
Okay. That's interesting that both of you guys had these experiences where police officers couldn't tell the difference, one between a water hose gun and then between a cell phone. My first question with that, and this is obviously an opinion, if people who can't tell the difference between a cell phone or a water hose, should they be carrying a gun?
No, they should continue to be in Boy Scouts. That's all they are.
So now I want to get to kind of the bench itself. I did speak with Bob Livingston of Parks and Rec, and he's the chair. He was just pretty much very finite about the process that you need to go through to get the bench. So I just want to play a quick clip from him right now. So when you get the application, what things are you looking at to approve it, to say yay or nay on that application?
We basically are trusting that staff has looked at the particular park or area where it wants to be, that there's a sufficient place to hold the weight of the bench, whether it's a sidewalk or a slab that's there or a slab that gets poured, that it's not going to interfere with irrigation or be in the flow of reclaimed water sprinklers, that there aren't too many benches there, that it would be what we call an amenity. Someone could sit and look at it. But we are basically trusting that staff has looked at it and said, we think a bench is fine here. So again, the Parks Commission is recommending the location is good, and then we're directing staff to install the bench, which is part of their daily routine of maintaining parks and providing amenities in parks.
So the city manager and the chief of police are hoping that these kind of benches don't get approved in the future. What's your take on that?
I think that take might be a little broad. The city manager did call me and say that he felt this particular bench went a little above the historic purpose or design of benches. Most of them, as I said earlier, just have a plaque. There might be a little bit of artwork. There might be a little bit more verbiage. But this one, some people would say had a political statement. Some people would just say had a statement of grief from the family. And so I think the city manager's concern is going forward, what are the exact parameters for the bench program? And I also said, well, for this particular bench, we need to look at the mural program. Because to me, the bench location, that's pretty perfunctory. If we are going to be approving murals on benches, or if we're going to be approving murals throughout the city and parks or other parts of the city, maybe we do need a little bit more guidelines or better defined guidelines. I think, as I recall, when this bench went in, there was a little concern about that word justice, but we all felt that as far as an artist expressing themselves, that was their First Amendment right. We didn't have in our opinion, or at least in my opinion and my vote, didn't have the authority to say, I'm not going to approve this just because of what it says.
And you said it was a little expensive. What, if I can ask, if I wanted to donate a bench, or if I wanted to get a bench, what would be my my starting cost for that?
The basics for a bench with a plaque is, I believe, is $5,000.
Wow.
Then if you want to have the name engraved on the back, sunken into the back, I think that's another $1,000 to $1,500. If it's installed somewhere where there isn't a wide enough sidewalk for it to support the weight of the bench and people to get by, then you have to buy a slab, and that could be as much as $3,000. And then the location of the bench, I believe, is only guaranteed for 10 years. And then either you're asked to renew it for a little bit less, or it goes back into inventory.
So first of all, I love Bob and how just matter of fact he is. And like, this is how much, and this process is very expensive. So Audrena, what was the first steps for you given this process? You have to fill out an application, and then obviously there's a cost assessed to it. What made you say, you know what, this bench is needed to memorialize Donte?
Well, I mean, it started with the summer of George Floyd. That's, summer of 2020. And, the city was being extraordinarily responsive to what it came to call racism as a public health crisis. And so the Griselda Suarez from the Long Beach Arts Council reached out and said, we want to take this opportunity in this time to create some murals and some other memorial pieces around the city. Long Beach has long been into that kind of thing. It adds a nice flair to our town. So then we spent some time brainstorming on what that might be. And park benches came up somehow because I was talking about, well, we do a thing every year at Seaside Park, memorializing Donte. Fred Taft was murdered at Pan Am Park. It'd be nice to put some markers in those parks. And so that began that process. And I don't know if I would have made it through the entire process without the Long Beach Arts Council, quite frankly. I had no idea how to do any of that, but there are several memorial benches around town. So
yeah, this is the first one I've seen this colorful, though.
Yes.
these are these. Yes,
The first two
yes,
that I've seen this colorful, and that, like, to your point, I'm like, I just kind of want to drive by there and see that bench, which I think is a testament, because that's what you want people to do. You want them to come and enjoy the
and
park.
sit and enjoy
Yeah.
the park. And so to have gotten notification that there was this memo put together by the city manager and with the support of the chief of police, it's like, really, you don't have anything else to be more concerned about than a park bench, and not only but a park bench that adds beauty and color to our city, a city which for the last 20 some odd years has been very busy adding beauty and color on walls,
Right.
privately owned walls, on publicly owned walls, on utility cabinets, building all kinds of artsy bike stands, all of that. So there's no problem with any of that. There's only a problem with the bench that's dedicated to a man that was murdered by the Long Beach Police Department.
So to that point, I want to read one of the lines from that memo, which I have a whole lot of yellow on this page. These were things that were problematic to me, but we're just going to go one at a time. But he says, the applicants have stated publicly their belief that the resident was murdered by our Long Beach police officers. The facts of the case, as investigated by outside agencies and determined by the district attorney after detailed review, where the Long Beach police officers responded to a call of a man discharging their firearms. He goes basically on to say that this was a justifiable shooting. It's a long. I didn't go into all the wording,
you
but
can call it a justifiable shooting. The fact of the matter, Donte Jordan is no longer on this side of the planet, of the plane. Okay, that's the fact. The fact is that officers associated with the Long Beach Police Department are responsible. You can dress it up and call it whatever you want to call it. The fact is, he was murdered. He was shot in the back. That is murder.
I think the other thing that kind of stood out to me as well is when he says, by outside agencies and determined by the district attorney, as if we don't know that the district attorney is an extension of the police.
They all work together.
Correct.
Like, what are we talking about
Correct.
right now?
They
And
investigate themselves.
Mhm.
and as if Black folk, if there's a long history of Black folk getting justice because district attorneys are involved, and we know that that is not the case at all.
Absolutely. And the problem with this is there's zero accountability when you take this position that shooting someone in the back is justified. When you make assumptions, first of all, the phrase fit the description had to make the hairs on every Black person's neck stand up, because I have fit the description 3 times of nobody that I was associated with in any way, and come to find out 2 of those, I didn't look anything like the person. I'm way too tall. I'm 5'11". This person's 5'3". How do I fit the description?
You're Black.
Exactly. And so I think there is when you take this position that, this was justified, it prevents police reform. And I think that is the bigger issue of this statement from the city manager and the chief of police signing on it.
And there's a problem with the word reform.
Okay.
Because what are we reforming? We're reforming something that was always put into place to oppress Black bodies.
Absolutely.
So we don't want to reform it. We actually would like to get rid of it, and build systems that actually help people. But in the meantime, as we travel that road, so we have police and they have jobs to do. But why is it that the job is always involving shooting to kill? Because they are kill shots. They are kill shots. When you're shooting someone, you're aiming at the head or anywhere in here, or you're shooting to kill someone. But if you are shooting to stop someone, you can shoot them. There are other ways to do that. But apparently, what is evident, not only because of what happened to Donte, but what happens across this country, is that police are taught to shoot to kill.
Most of them are Army vets that are kids that was bullied all their life. So they have dropped the sheets and now they hide behind a gun and a badge.
And it's a difficult situation to be in, because I also covered the shooting of Eric Brown the third, the young 12-year-old young man that was shot and killed as a result of gang violence. So there's levels to each problem, because yes, you want justice, right? But I remember being at his memorial, and there's all these Black people from around the community in and outside of this young man's neighborhood that were there to support. There were Black people mostly doing safe passages during the day, but there were some white people there as well. But at the memorial, there was a very strong police presence there, which I could have seen as a very, they're here to support. The difficulty for me, and Audrena, I definitely want to get your opinion on this. And I asked the officer in charge at the time. She told me to go to their website and check out the demographics. But the problem that I had at the time was there was nothing but Black people in that space that were in mourning and were traumatized, and all you saw outside was white police officers. How are we supposed to perceive that?
You should perceive it as it's easier to criminalize our communities than it is to criminalize the police. And I'm going to say that because when there's street violence, which that was street violence, and God rest that young man's soul, let me first say that, and deep condolences to his family, and efforts for community healing are underway. So I want to just say that. But where were the police showing up for this bench? Where is the police support for this family as they continue to heal from this crisis, this situation that they caused that really can't ever be repaired, right? So it's much easier for them to criminalize and to deal with what they perceive as criminal and show up as if they are the heroes, when they actually insinuate some situations and incite situations and help situations along. Why wouldn't they? Where there is crime, that means they have justification for their work.
And that, I say that all the time. It's interesting. You kind of say it the longer way, but I always tell people, police do not prevent crime. They react to it. And when it comes to us, they often react in the worst possible way.
Right. And they criminalize us. So again, showing up at that funeral in that way, that was, I'm sure in their heads that was meant to send a sense of safety, and maybe to some other folks it sent a sense of safety. But I'm sure to quite a few it's like, why are they here?
And I'm not related to this young man, but I feel like a lot, especially with the Black community, a lot of, if not most of the distrust we have for police is warranted. And I feel like in that moment, you had a moment to shine. You had a moment to show up in a way that didn't seem like you were just standing out there to make sure that Black people didn't get out of hand. That's how it looked to me. And I'm not the one grieving. So I would imagine that it probably looked that way to other people there who were, especially when you're in a grieving state. And for me, and I know you don't like the word reform, but because we're stuck with them, I think that's the word I always go to.
No, we're not stuck with them. We have to figure out how to unstick ourselves from them.
My dad used to say that. We got to get unstuck.
They have not always police have not always existed, and they certainly have not existed in the militarized way that they currently exist. It is, however, true that they have always existed in some form to monitor our bodies, our ancestors' bodies, but they have not always been armed. They have not always had heavy military equipment. They have not always been taught to shoot to kill. Things have changed in the last 50, 60, 70 years or so.
So do you, and this is a broader question because I mean, I don't know if you're on social media as much as I am too, but I know internationally you see all these officers that have immense success disarming people without shooting their firearms. And on top of that, like when you consider the Netherlands, it's designed, the word like prison reform, or when you go in to pay your debt to society, it's not a survivable system in my opinion. To be in that, in our our prison system, it's very inhumane in my opinion. And you're not, you're having young people mostly go out and fight fires for like $1 a day and things of that nature. And it is, I mean, let's be honest, the 13th Amendment still basically allows for slavery as long as you're incarcerated. But when you look abroad and you see people really understanding what reform means when someone commits a crime. Okay, let's get to the root of why you committed the crime. Let's give you skills so you can be, and the success rate they have with that. And then sometimes for me, it's difficult to see that, and then basically read a memo like this that says, "Yeah, we shot your son, but oh well." That's how I read it. How did you read it?
Same way.
Okay,
That was the only way to read that.
right.
No accountability whatsoever. I never got a phone call. I had to find out from one of his friends. Nobody reached out to my family.
So no one even reached out to you and said, "Hey, we're about to issue this memo."
No care.
No, nobody. Next thing I know, I saw it on the news.
Really? That's wow. That's just a lot to unpack.
Went to the
there.
hospital. I went to the hospital. I'm thinking maybe I didn't know the police had shot him. They like Donte got shot. He's at St. Mary's, and when I went there, and I worked at St. Mary's at that time, and through registry, so I knew the two security guards. A chaplain didn't come down, a nurse, a doctor, none of that. They sent them two doggone rent-a-cops out there, and they came out there and crossed their arms like this and said he didn't make it. And of course, I just lost it, and I'm like, what? And my daughter's like, well, Mom, if this true, we're gonna have to make some arrangements because I wanted to get back there to see my boy. How do you know it's him? I need to see him, And so they had called a paddy wagon to come and arrest us.
What?
And then we had to fight for his body to have his memorial.
What do you mean you had to fight for his body?
He wasn't at the city morgue. They said that he wasn't at St. Mary's, and at that point we hadn't assigned a mortuary to pick his body up, and so I had to go down there with all the men in my family and talk to Officer Jackson, I think it was, and then he told me he was at the city morgue that I could send a mortuary to get his body so we could prepare him for a service. And that took for about 3 or 4 days. We didn't know where his body was.
That's not
his funeral wasn't until the 29th, and he was killed. Until the 23rd, and he got killed on the 10th.
Yeah, that's not an uncommon story, sadly, with people who are killed by the police because they got to get their story together, right? They got to fix the situation to match the narrative that they want to hear. And so, in the meantime, who's caring for these family members who are members of the community, who are taxpayers, who are human beings? Who's caring for them? This is the level of treatment and the kind of treatment. Even with this, did anybody bother to reach out to Pam Fields about the bench and have a conversation? No, they shot this missive off.
Yeah.
And shot the missive off without even understanding fully what the dang on bench said.
Yeah, and there
Because
was
we
a line-
changed the language, twice?
And why did you change the language?
Because they didn't want. What did I have put? I had put justice for my son killed by Long Beach Police Department.
Yeah, but you knew that wasn't gonna fly.
I didn't
Right.
know.
Well, we were,
But we changed that.
that was the original language for the bench that we submitted. And even when Pam, I said, Pam, what do you want the front of the bench to say? And I said, now you know we're gonna have some problems with that.
Right.
And sure enough, and so no problem, because it was more important to have the memorial bench for Donte than it was to mention anything about the folks responsible for his death.
Yeah,
Right?
we
It
already
was
know they did it. So
far
it wasn't
more
even.
Right.
it's far more important to have a marker there. Pam goes to that park a lot. As I said, every year we would, before the pandemic anyway, we were in that park once a year doing a memorial where we ate, we listened to music, we talked about Donte, we fed the houseless people in the community. That's what we did. And so that bench was perfect in that park.
And he lived right across the street from that park, and he got killed right on the corner from that park. Yeah.
It's interesting to me because this just, raises a lot of other, being a journalist for a while, I've seen a lot of different things. And one of the things that's always surprising to me is, when we had the crack epidemic in our communities, it was like, oh, well, if you've got this much crack, let's send you to jail for the rest of your life. But then when the opioid epidemic hit the white communities, it's like, oh yeah, you know what? There's this one line in this bill that was called drug court. We didn't do that for Black folks, but let's do that
Yeah, they
now.
have drug court. They got mental
Right.
court now.
Let's do that. And then we talk so much about mental health. And for me, the first thing I thought when I was reading even the report from the district attorney, the first thing I thought to myself was, okay, somebody is shooting off a gun at a Shell station and then walking away with headphones on and a cell phone. Something's wrong. Like there's some sort of break here. And I do believe in my heart of hearts, and I am sure my editors are going to hear about this, but I do believe in my heart of hearts, if Donte was white, we would not be sitting here right now.
Oh, no.
I don't think we'd be sitting here either.
Because there's certain, and I think we're just used to that. We're used to knowing that we're seen as the villain. So there's always this pushback when we say we're tired of being seen this way. We want the same allowances. And we've seen it on national TV. We've seen Black men laying on the ground with their hands up, getting shot. We've seen white guys with machetes. Sir, calm down.
We've seen white guys attacking the police, beating the police up, cussing the police out, banging on police vehicles.
But that's why, and I don't disagree with you in any way regarding your opinion about the police, but in this statement, to me, it screamed, this is the way we are. This is the way we are always going to be. While at the same time, I've been out with police and they say, we want your community to trust us. How can you have it both ways?
Well, you can't have it both ways, because what that is gaslighting us. It's gaslighting us. It's doing a thing to us, right? And then saying, "Oh no, that's not what's happening. That's not what's happening. You all are doing this. This is you people. This is how you are policing this community. This is how the entire institution, is how the entire structure sets up the managing and the oppression of Black people. The police are just a tool in that process. With they ought to be ashamed.
I do want
And
to.
that's not really a strong enough word.
Yeah, but we on air, so I know I get it. But Pamela, there was one line that truly troubled me. I mean, let me not say one line. Several lines in this memo troubled me, but there was one line that really just kind of angered me, and I just want to see if you read it and how you felt about it. And at the end, he says, while we understand and support the need for families and friends to grieve and remember loved ones, regardless of how those loved ones were lost, to do so in this manner with the use of public assets can impact the basic principles of community policing and public trust that our police department is committed to providing.
It's just like saying that, like we said earlier, they killed him, and so what?
Mm-hmm. When you hear that public trust that our department is committed to providing.
There's no trust. That trust has been broken long time ago. I remember when I was a little girl, the police would bring, my uncle was an alcoholic, and the police would just bring him home, the car home. They would buy us ice cream. I've seen them out there jump roping with my cousins and them. It's nothing like it used to be.
You know, I
They were more getting to know the families,
Right.
getting to know the needs of the family. They'd be like, oh, you that such and such son. Let me take you home to your mama.
I used to, before I started working at the Post, I was overseas for 2 years. I worked on an island called Saipan as a news journalist over there. And I was so excited to go there. I just wanted to see. It's a Commonwealth of the United States, but it feels like an entirely different country on several levels. But one of the things that I was truly impressed by, and I'm not going to say that the police department didn't have flaws. I feel like anytime you have people involved, there's going to be a level of flaws. People aren't perfect. But what you didn't see was you didn't see shootings. You didn't see people getting beat up by the police. Matter of fact, to your point, I was out one night. There was an altercation and the police rolled up. They knew who I was. They was like, what do you want us to do? I'm like, I mean, I don't want her to go to jail. I just want her to go home. Okay, we could take her home. And they took her home and she was fine. And it was in, I remember going to the police department the next day because at the time I'm working for the news station. I ended up working for the police department as a public information officer before I left the island just because I wanted to ingrain myself in that system that actually worked. And the reason why it worked is because it's really difficult to shoot somebody in the back when you know you got to see their parents at church on Sunday, or you got to go to the grocery store and see the family members. There's an actual community policing happens when the people you police, you live in the community with.
Exactly.
And we don't have that here.
We don't. They don't. Most of the police here, they live out there where I live. I live in Anaheim.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they don't know nothing about the community. They don't know nothing about the needs of the community, and nor do they care.
Mm-hmm.
They just come in to do what they do, get paid, and cause as much wreckage as they can.
I'm going to push back a little bit on that narrative. Not your experience in that small place, the island, but just, we have this idea that, well, if we have cops from the community, then they'll care more about the community. You can look at the LA sheriffs and we look at the gangs within the sheriff department.
point.
They're from the community,
Great
right?
point.
And they're acting like they're from the community within the sheriff department. They have become the legal criminals in the community. So I think there's a broader problem here, and that broader problem is something we would call structural racism. It is just baked into this country. It's the way in which these officers are trained to treat Black people. It's the way in which, even if you are a Black cop, you get that same training. You have that same level of suspicion of other Black people because those are the stories. That's the narrative. That's the imagery of criminals.
Right.
Sociologists have done studies for years, and it's true even among Black people. Because that's the narrative. We are the bad cops. We are not the bad cops. That too.
Yeah.
But we are bad and not good. Even calling ourselves Black people as opposed to deeper brown people, Black is associated with evil, with bad. White is, all of these things play a role in the way that we're treated. So not to negate your experience, but just saying in here,
it won't help here. Is what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So aside from dismantling the police department, is there a way that we could fix the current policing system, specifically here in Long Beach?
Well, listen, I think we need to take a look at their budget. The city council just passed some other budget decisions on Tuesday around the police. Again, some more gaslighting stuff, starting the Youth Policing Academy. So I think we need to take a look at their budget and then take a look at what our city really needs. We know, it's just common sense. People do what they have to do to survive. Crime goes up when people don't have enough they don't have their needs are not being met. Housing is an issue. Food is an issue. Being able to just live life is an issue. Crime goes up. A drug addiction goes up. Drinking goes up. All of those things go up. It's not rocket science. We know our city has done studies. They know what the problem is, they know where it is. And yet we continue to spend almost half of our city budget on the police department, which does not solve crimes and certainly does not prevent crime. So let's start with that. Let's invest in mental health. Let's invest in education. Let's invest in housing. Let's invest in health care for people. Those the things that people really need. What's more important, feeding me or having some guy watching me?
Feeding you.
Absolutely.
Because a guy watching you is going to have to feed you at some point anyway. So
Exactly.
if you had met that need earlier, maybe that guy wouldn't be watching
That's
you.
exactly right. That's exactly right. And education that matters. Education that is a pathway to self-determination, not education that's just a holding place for you because we don't know what else to do with you young people.
Yeah,
So
the preschool to prison pipeline
that's exactly
is very,
right.
very real.
That's
It's
exactly
very,
right.
very real. I will say though, on a personal note, this is very unfortunate that this memo came out, and I just want you to know that, personally, that's why I wanted to bring you on the show, is because I wanted you to know that despite this memo, there are people in the community that care and that are, in your corner and supporting you and want you to feel loved and cared for. So
Okay, thank you.
I just
Tell them I said thank
yes,
you.
I just want to make sure you
Could
knew
I say
that.
something too? I think another thing that I'm looking forward to is one day where the police be held accountable, meaning they would have to have their own insurance policy instead of the city paying out the loved ones. They need to come out of their insurance policy. And they think twice before they shoot somebody else because they're going to be a liability and nobody's going to want to insure them.
Well, we have to also end qualified immunity. That's the
Absolutely.
law that these people hide behind, saying that they are justified in everything that they do because they have the public interest at heart. Clearly, they don't have the public interest at heart. You could talk to any Black person in America and ask them, how safe do you feel with the police really?
I feel safe for the three of us figuring out whatever's going on.
That's right. Using our intuition, our spidey senses, and so to
Who
say.
can we trust? Not the police.
So we have to end qualified immunity, and thankfully, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley Holmes is carrying a bill to do just that, and that's a way that they'll be accountable. Right now, there's no accountability. There's no accountability. They can say what this guy said in here is justifiable. Well, Donald Trump says everything is justifiable.
I wonder how you write a memo like this and then end it with public trust.
Yes.
I would love, City Commissioner, I would love for you and the Chief of Police to come on the show and explain that, because there wasn't an ounce of humanity in this memo. In my opinion, it felt very antagonistic, and it had a lack of concern and compassion in it, and it had this air of, we're always right, despite the fact that he was shot in the back. It's fine. So what? Be done with it and move on. And I think that's very offensive. So if you guys are open to coming on the show, I would love to have you on. I am extending that invitation right now. Audrena, do you want to say anything before we close?
We are part of coalitions of folks in the city who go to the council and ask for budget. And, we turn out 50, 60, 70, 100, 70 people at the council meeting, and we're not heard. There's always this invisible they. Right? That memo brought back all of that sense for me. Who's the they that this memo was written for? Who's the they that you are talking about? Is it police? Is it people who don't live in this city? Is it police? Is it people who live in one part of the city? Who are the they? Because there are other voices who are very loudly saying something else. And I want to give a special thanks again to the Long Beach Arts Council, to the Long Beach Parks, Rec, and Marine Commission, and to the Friends of Park for understanding what this project was they undertook and moving forward with it and standing on their decision, because it was a right decision. Imagine if we had all of the memorial benches in town were painted to remember the people who they were for. It just adds a sense of loveliness.
Yeah, it's beautiful
to the city, and so it's hurtful, and it's hurtful, and it's insensitive, and it's once again that memo is an example of exactly how the police department treats people, family members whose loved ones they've taken.
Thank you guys both so much. And I am really glad that even though this is a hard time, the three of us can sit here and end this, with smiles on our faces. And I think the message that I want you guys to know that's the power of the community. We talk about that a lot on this show, about the Black community really needs to figure out a way to come together, put all of our differences aside, because at the end of the day, I really, in my heart of hearts, believe that we are all we got. So I thank you so much for coming on the show. We're going to keep up this narrative. At some point, there's going to be another show that I'm doing called The Conversation, where we're going to take a deeper dive into why we as Black people even still use the N-word. So that show is slated to come out sometime in August. So make sure you stay tuned with the word so you can know when that's coming out. And thank you guys both again for coming on the show. Make sure you guys go out and see the bench, because I know you've seen those drab benches around the city. This is not one of those. It is absolutely beautiful. It's a great representation of Donte. Thank you for fighting to make sure we could get it in the park. It's beautiful. All right, that's our show. Once again, I'm Jackie Ray. And remember, if you have to speak a word, make it a good one. We'll see you next time.
Okay, let's go.